Hello, I am Megan and welcome to Battle Royale with Cheese. But this is going to be a different type of video. Instead of one film review, we're going to be doing a video on Frightfest Horror Film Festival. So this is a horror film and sci-fi film festival that runs from the 22nd of August till the 26th of August in London's Leicester Square, as you can see behind me. And firstly, I do also want to say I apologise about the noise. It is very windy here, but yeah, I thought we'd do a video on the festival. I'll show you around, we'll review a couple of the films that I'll be watching. So yeah, come join me for Frightfest Horror Film Festival in London. So, while a few seconds have passed for you guys, 2 days have actually passed for me. So we're at the end of day 2 now of Frightfest. And I did say in the intro that I was probably only going to see a few films. That's all I'd get time for. I have only seen 2 films, so I saw one last night for the opening day and one today. And bearing in mind that the first day, the opening day, usually starts around 5:30 p.m. It's not too bad. You only get a choice of 3 films per screen. And the festival was actually held across 2 cinemas. So you had the main one, which I filmed the intro in, as well as the Odeon Lux, which is where the premieres are held. And I got to see both cinemas. So before I continue on, I do just want to say I apologise if there's going to be any camera shaking or anything like that. This is going to be a very vlog style video of the festival, so I apologise in advance for that. But yeah, so last night I saw Invisible Raptor. So this was a comedy horror film about a group of scientists who create an invisible velociraptor, and it escapes and causes havoc on a small town. And this was really silly, really fun, really funny. The audience were really into it as well, which is good. I think some of the cast were there. I think some of the lead cast were in attendance, because I heard cheers and stuff from them occasionally when certain things happened and certain characters showed up. But I wanted to start the festival with just kind of a silly, cheesy, funny sort of horror film, like a B movie, just to ease into the festival. And this was definitely a good choice to pick. This was really, really fun, really funny. The idea of an invisible raptor did also create some tense moments though, because this has a lot of kills in it. And a lot of the time you didn't know when they were going to happen, because you can't see the raptor. They don't, and up until the end they don't sort of show the audience or let the audience see the raptor. So it did create a lot of tense moments because you never knew when the kill was going to happen. And with that, it was quite gory. I think a lot of the gore was CGI. A lot of the gore looked like it was CGI instead of practical effects, but I don't know. But they did look a lot of the time cartoony. But regardless of that, we definitely got some interesting kills, which definitely the audience seemed to enjoy. You kind of know with these kind of films what you're going into, and this was definitely a nice sort of, weird to describe, but a nice comfort watch to ease into the film festival. I think my only issue with Invisible Raptor was that it just kind of went on for a bit too long. There was a certain point in the film where I felt like one scene was just unnecessary, and it did sort of hinder and slow down the plot. I was just like, okay, I feel like 10-15 minutes could have been shaved off, and I don't think the film would have changed too much. I think the way round in which the film would have gone and the way it would have got to that point would be different, but the overall outcome wouldn't actually change. So I think that was my only issue, is that it just felt a bit too long. But aside from that, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. And the idea of an invisible dinosaur wreaking havoc is both unique and really absurd. So the second film that I saw was actually a documentary. So this was called So Unreal. So this was to do with how technology has shaped us and our relationship with technology in terms of films and filmmaking. This one was really interesting because I think for the first quarter of the film, I didn't really know what it was trying to do or the direction it was trying to take. But actually, it had a really interesting perspective of the modern eye, essentially, and looking back at 80s and 90s films that dealt with technology. So like Hackers, The Matrix. There was an interesting one called Arcade with Neve Campbell, which I've never heard of. They did pull some interesting films that I'd never heard of before to sort of prove the points that the documentary was making, or to expand upon a topic, which I quite enjoyed, and they pulled some really obscure ones. War Games was another film that was mentioned, Ghost in the Shell, the original one, but it was all to do with the perspective of the technology that those films use through the modern eye, and the fact that actually a lot of these technologies, so like virtual reality and AI and facial recognition, that's not science fiction anymore. Yeah, it was a really interesting documentary in terms of watching it through the perspective of a modern eye and actually realising that we have all this technology now. It also sort of commented on the idea of, well, actually, social media exists, so it's easier now more than ever to dox people and spread false information, which a lot of these kind of sci-fi films were doing in extreme ways that aren't really that extreme anymore. It was a really interesting documentary and really interesting one to look at, especially with me being a 90s kid, thinking back at the time, like, oh, these films are all really fictitious and, that wouldn't happen. And then rewatching it now, being like, yeah, actually, it would do. It's very real now, unfortunately. So that was an interesting one. I think it just had a bit of a rocky start. But some of these documentaries have sort of uneven and rocky introductions until they get to the point they're trying to make, or start to explain the point they're getting to. But I really enjoyed it. So it's called So Unreal, and the one I saw last night was Invisible Raptor. So it's day 3 tomorrow. I actually don't have any films scheduled. I don't think so anyway. I'm going to see if there's going to be any return tickets for anything. But this is the thing. It is going to be a case of, let's see what films I can get and go from there, really. So, yeah, bring on day 3. So the last day of Frightfest is tomorrow. I actually didn't get to see any films today, but I did see a film last night. I only saw one, and that was The Last Voyage of the Demeter. So, this is actually a film that as of recording and probably as of the upload, has not got a UK distribution. So this was actually really special, and Frightfest was only going to do one screening, which sold out really quickly, because this is pretty much, aside from going the illegal route, this is pretty much the only way that the UK is going to be able to see the film. And so that sold out really, really quickly. So they added a second screening, which was a subtitled screening, and that was the one that I attended. And it's essentially based on the chapter Captain's Log from the book Dracula. So in that chapter, a boat is discovered crashed onto the shore of England, and all of the crew are dead. And this film is essentially, here's what happened that led up to it. And it was really good. I do have a couple of issues with it, but aside from that, it was really, really good. The creature design of Dracula was fantastic, and I like that they went with a more monstrous and bat-like design. It kind of reminded me of, if you remember the Van Helsing film with Hugh Jackman, it kind of reminded me of that a bit. I apologise if the camera wobbles as well. I'm sort of doing this handheld. But it kind of reminded me of that, and yeah, it was a really cool creature design. The music and the cast were all fantastic. The music was really good. So the music was by BRWC, I think that's how you pronounce his name. But he did the 10 Cloverfield Lane soundtrack. But I think what was really good about this one was actually, because Captain's Log, that chapter in the book, does show the end result, it kind of gives the film like a clean slate. So as long as we get the end result of the book, you can kind of do whatever. So it was kind of cool for them to be like, okay, let's actually create technically a new story within a well-known novel, within a well-known media. So I really did appreciate that. And yes, even though you know the end result, I feel like the film also knew that as well, because it kind of played with that a bit, which I also liked. And of course, this being a vampire film, the gore and the effects were fantastic. The only issue I kind of had with it was that there was just one scene where one of the characters had been pretty smart for a while, and then just did something really stupid for the sake of, okay, well, we need them all picked off, so let's just have this character be dumb for this one scene. And that just felt a bit jarring. I did appreciate that the crew of the ship sort of caught on pretty quickly what was going on. I did appreciate that. There wasn't really any sort of, oh, you're lying, it can't be this, it can't be that. It sort of did for a while, until a certain point, but then, yeah, very quickly everyone sort of caught on to what was happening. So I did appreciate that. I think another thing I found a bit annoying was the scares. So some of the scares were good, but a lot of them was sort of the stereotypical jump scares where you have like the stinger sound and the rising music that goes on for ages. It was a lot of those kind of scares, which did get a little frustrating sometimes. But overall, I really enjoyed it. I'm glad I got to see it in cinema, even if this might be the only time that the UK cinemas are going to get it. I don't even know if this is coming out on DVD and Blu-ray, because there's been distribution problems. So I don't know if or when this will come out in the UK. So I am glad I actually got a chance to see it. But that was the last voyage of the Demeter. So that was the only film I actually saw last night. Tomorrow is the last day of Frightfest Film Festival. I'm going to try and see 2 films. So this will depend on if I can wake up in time. So 11 AM is Schittler, the what's it called? The Evil in the Woods. So Schittler, Evil in the Woods. And then at 3:15 is a documentary called Generation Terror. So yeah, so you'll either get just a review on Generation Terror, or you'll get a review on both films. Also, just a heads up, the location will change because I'm also going home tomorrow. So the location will be back to what it usually is for tomorrow's reviews. But yeah, last day of Frightfest. And I'm back home. So Frightfest for this year has now finished. On to next year, unless I can go to the Halloween event. I apologise, this room might be quite echoey, and I have looked at the previous clips in the other place I was staying at, so I apologise that there is white noise. Where I filmed is pretty much the only place I could film in that area, in that place I was staying in, so I do apologise for that. But yeah, I didn't get to see Schlitter Evil in the Woods yesterday morning because it was completely sold out, but I did get to see Generation Terror. So this was a documentary to do with, essentially to do with a timeline of horror films from the late 90s to the mid 2000s and what influenced filmmakers at that time in terms of what was going on in the world at that time. So a lot of it was to do with post 9/11 horror films and how that movement came about. This was a really interesting documentary. I really enjoyed it. It flowed really well, and because it was based on like a timeline, it was going through sort of chronological order. Yeah, it flowed really well. It was edited really well, and I really enjoyed it. I think if you're interested in films from the 90s and films from the 2000s up until 2010, then I would really recommend this. The filmmakers also did the found footage phenomenon from a couple of years ago. And that was to do with the found footage genre and how that started and where it is now. And that was also really good as well. So if you liked the found footage phenomenon, then I would definitely recommend Generation Terror. At the time, it's just had its Frightfest screening. It doesn't have a distributor yet, but I imagine maybe Shudder or Amazon Prime will probably pick it up. They usually do. A lot of the Frightfest films will either go onto Shudder or Amazon Prime. So it's just a case of waiting to see when that's going to get released. But to recap, the films I saw was So Unreal, which is a documentary on technology in films and a look at technology in terms of real life as well as films. I also saw The Last Voyage of the Demeter, so that's based on a chapter in the book Dracula. That was fantastic. I forgot to mention my first film was Invisible Raptor, which was a very silly, funny horror comedy to ease me into the festival. Went on for a little bit too long, but I enjoyed it regardless. And then Generation Terror, which is the documentary. Two films that showed at Frightfest, but I actually did written reviews for before the festival, because they also showed at Popcorn Frights Film Festival, was Drive Back and The Lonely Man with a Ghost Machine. So I will put the links to those two reviews in the video description below, because I did coverage. I only did a couple of films, but I did coverage for Popcorn Frights Film Festival in America. So Drive Back, I enjoyed the second half a lot more. I thought the concept was really interesting, and it seemed to settle into its concept more in the second half. The first half was full of tired tropes that were used to progress the plot, and I don't think did that very well. But the second half was definitely worth sort of waiting around for. And then The Lonely Man with a Ghost Machine, I loved. I absolutely adored it. I thought it was fantastic. The use of colour and lighting in that film was really interesting and actually very important to the plot. And Graham Skipper, who plays the main character, for most of the film the only character on screen, he's fantastic. So I would definitely recommend checking out my written reviews for those films. but they were at Frightfest as well, but I didn't see them at Frightfest. I did pick up a couple of freebies, so most of them were stickers and badges, but before the screening for Invisible Raptor, we were given an Invisible Raptor figure, which I'll put a picture up. It is literally, there's nothing in it. There's nothing in it because, of course, invisible. But I thought it was really funny. I'll put a picture up of the front and back of it. But I thought that was really funny. But yeah, this was my Frightfest coverage for this year. I'm trying to think what's the next Frightfest one I'll be at. It will either be the Halloween event or it will be next year. There is a Glasgow event, but I live way too far away to go up to Glasgow, so that's not going to happen. So it'll either be the Halloween event or it will be the main event next year. But I was Megan. This is Battle Royale with Cheese. See you soon.